Hey, what's going on, guys? Kalamazi here, and tonight I want to talk to you all a little bit about patch 10.1's newest raid, Aberrus the Shadow Crucible, from a Warlock POV. I made a video about a month ago, roughly give or take, when heroic testing had concluded, looking at initial bosses, where the class sort of was, and what specs are doing best in each fight. But things have changed. Affliction was gutted. The fights have changed a bit. Mythic mechanics change things a bit here and there as well. So this video tonight will be looking at each boss individually, discussing what changes from heroic to mythic a little bit, and talking about what specs felt best, what builds of each spec. I guess it's mostly Demo and Destro, let's be honest. AF is not the best right now. And looking at the best builds of the best, or I guess best envisioned spec for all those fights. Now, if you like any week auras or add-ons, anything you see in this video, links to Twitch and Discord down below are all for free for you guys. And like usual, I also want to give one huge shout out to my patrons. Guys, thank you for supporting Patreon 10,000 times. Always, I really appreciate it. Heads up, the 10.1 PTR spreadsheet is indeed now live on Patreon for the Tier 3 Belgar rank or higher, if you like early access to that. And should be a link up here as well as down below if you're interested. And yeah, let's just jump right into it, starting off with the first boss, Kazzara. As mentioned, Kazzara is the first boss in Aberrus the Shadow Crucible, and this is going to be a pure single-target, patchwork-based boss with some frequent, I guess, involuntary movement, random movement, depending if you get targeted with a laser beam. Now, the main difference from this fight on Heroic is that the laser beams do not despawn if you're targeted. You have to kite them into these pools that are being left in the ground behind my character here. Besides that, it's just more ray damage. The boss has more health from what I remember, and that's pretty much the gist of it. It's a single target, just burn the boss down kind of encounter, and is pretty suiting for a first boss. Now, in later testing, there were a lot of lasers that spawned in later waves, like 6 lasers, 9 lasers, comparatively to early waves having 3, which meant the fight became pretty hectic. But outside of that, there really wasn't a whole lot else to it. I ended up playing Demonology for this fight. Both Demo and Destro are solid options here. Destro is just very immobile when it comes to getting targeted by random mechanics, getting a laser on you, which I think gives the nod to Demonology here, whether you're playing the Pit Lord build or the Immutable Hatred build. I personally would lean more towards the build playing Immutable Hatred with just baseline Nether Portal and going from there, which is going to be, I would assume, from what I've seen, your best single target bet overall with mobility mixed in. I wouldn't fault you for playing Destro here. Realistically, AF isn't the best option just due to where it's currently tuned. But either way, Kazzara shouldn't take your guild very long. It should be a pretty simple first boss, and there's also a chance at a rare trinket that could drop. Now, if your guild opts to go to the left part of the raid once you kill Kazzara, the next boss you're going to encounter is called the Amalgamation Chamber. This boss has a Shadow Ad and a Fire Ad, which are split, and when one reaches half health, they will shield for about 8 seconds, and then form into one ad, which has a remaining health pool based on the amount of health that they both sort of had when they combined. I'm bad at math, I live in Florida, but it's okay, because it's roughly around 60% give or take if you're pushing the bosses at a relatively even rate. Now, at that point, the fight becomes pretty much a single target, tank and spank, patchwork fight, and once again, Warlock is very good at that. I think Destruction is the best option here. There is spread cleave in this fight, and you can have a group in the middle of the room that cleaves both ads down pretty easily, and once they converge into one ad, Destro is also very good at single target. You can use demonic gateways, demonic circles to move out of the mechanics the main boss puts out when they form into one, and this boss really shouldn't be that problematic either because it's the second boss in the raid. It's a fun boss, it's an exciting boss, but I don't feel going to be a very challenging boss. Thankfully, like Kazzara, this also looks to be a very good Warlock fight, and if you're a Destro fan, I would likely play a build that tries to make decent use of your 2-piece, 4-piece. I'm not sure if you want to play Raging Demon Fire here as a possibility, but you certainly want to have Cry Havoc, Pandemonium, and all of the general spread 2-target Havoc-based talents, and just go from there. Now, if you opted to kill the Amalgamation Chamber second, chances are very likely you're going to be pulling this boss, the Forgotten Experiments, as your third boss in the raid. This boss on Heroic is relatively generic. There's one boss. There are 3 bosses total. When one dies, the other one comes down, and you kill all 3 and the boss is over. On Mythic, however, when one boss reaches half health, 50%, the second boss will jump down. Same with second and third boss, which means that this becomes a mix of a patchwork fight and a great 2-target Havoc-based fight, which is why I think both specs of Warlock here are very applicable. I would likely end up giving I'm probably going to give the nod to Destruction here, playing a similar Havoc build, quite possibly playing Raging Demon Fire if they're stacked, because our 2-piece, 4-piece does indeed feed into CDF. And If you don't feel like playing Destro, chances are decent. Demonology is likely pretty similar as well. You'll get a lot of stat cleave with Implosion, Demonic Strength, Fellstorm, all that. And this is likely just going to be a very good Warlock fight. I don't think it will be incredibly challenging. It is one of the earlier bosses in the raid. It is also a tier boss, though. And there's a decent trinket on this boss, too, which means if you're a Warlock, you're likely to be in for this fight for a plethora of reasons. I don't think it'll be incredibly challenging, but it will be a fun fight, taking good advantage of both Destro and Demonology's toolkits. Now, if your guild opts to go to the right after killing the first boss, Kazzara, Assault of the Zaqali is the second boss in the raid for you all. The boss you'll encounter if you take the right platform. And this boss is going to be quite possibly a wild ride when it comes to progression and mythic content. Now, I can't recall all the differences here between heroic and mythic. There is a bird that flies around that assaults your raid on mythic, which is not there. You can see it right now, which is not present on heroic. But besides that, this fight has been a wild ride in raid testing. Initially, on normal, the boss was incredibly overtuned. The shields had a lot more health than they should have, and were scaled pretty low. When it was tested on mythic the first time, the shields had, I believe, like 20 million health. This time, a few days ago, they had a whopping 140 million health. What you're seeing here is the early shield. Basically, picture that shield times 4. They have an incredible amount more health. This fight is both a good Demonology fight and a good Destro fight. You can get a lot of Destro Inferno AoE value with Rain of Fire spam, a good bit of Prio Cleave with Havoc. The unfortunate part is that Infernal is a 3-minute cooldown, but at the same time, we don't really even need Infernal for mass AoE anymore. To a similar extent, Demonology can provide a very strong amount of burst damage with Tyrant, Reign of Tyranny, Grimoire Felguard into the shielding adds, which are present every so often. To a similar extent, faster cooldowns, more frequent cooldowns means, I guess, more prior damage here, prior damage in phase 2 when the boss is mainly active as your final target. And it also brings a good stat cleave profile with Demonic Strength, with Implosion, with Fellstorm, Dog Cleave. So I would likely give the nod here to Demonology in a progression-based setting, but at the same time, Destro's still very good when it comes to single target, and also pretty good at heavy AoE, heavy sustained AoE, which is what this fight is. I wouldn't be surprised to see Demo played here in progression in Race World First settings, but later on, when this fight's on farm, I think chances are high this is more as a Destro fight, where you just ran a fire everything into the ground. And honestly, with this being one of the earlier bosses, it was likely overtuned in Mythic testing a few days ago. I'm hoping when we get to this boss, it really isn't a concern regardless what spec you play, because they just undertune it and it's not a wild ride like it has been for the duration of PTR testing. Once you defeat Assault of the Zaqali, the next boss is going to be Rashok. This testing here is the most recent version of Rashok testing that happened a few days ago, and they have cranked Rashok's damage and healing requirements up a tremendous amount. This fight, if you were a fan of Sludge Fist and Castle Nathria, this is going to be the fight for you. This is going to be a very heavy HPS check, a very heavy DPS check, and even mechanically, these fire orbs you're seeing that flying out of the corner of the room here, though those fire pools don't despawn. The longer this fight goes, the more fire orbs there are to dodge, and towards the end of this fight, you're going to have probably 8, 9, 10 pools active, which is going to make this fight hectic. Lots of heavy movement, random movement. I would give the nod here to Demonology, and I don't really think you can play Affliction, you can play Destruction, but I think Demonology is likely your best option due to how frequent there is random movement, planned movement with tank soaks, how little time you have to dance in the actual intermission with how often the boss pulses his fire-based ground AoE. I'm really excited for it, and I'm down to prog this fight as a Warlock as long as I don't have to play Destro. Playing Destro on this fight felt terrible due to Madness being 4 seconds long and really having so much movement. It's so hard to weave Chaos Bolts with Madness because the duration of Madness wasn't addressed in 10.1. We're still in 4-second territory. Demonology, and to a similar extent, Affliction probably feel pretty good in this fight, but Demonology is the much better spec when it comes to raw damage. Mythic Zskarn. This is going to be your Painsmith Raznal of the tier. This fight is 0 to 100 within 3 seconds. The fight is, we're at 10 seconds into this fight, half the room's full of fire, we're getting knocked back in a second here. This fight is going to be incredibly fun, but incredibly frustrating at certain times too. Now, I think Demonology or Destro are the better option here. I don't think AF, barring it being buffed and very, very strong, is really competitive for a plethora of reasons. I would lean towards playing a cleave build of Demonology, whether you're playing Pit Lord or Immutable Hatred. You probably want Implosion in more of the cleave-based elements due to these ads in the middle of the room here. To a similar extent, I did not test this on my own. I think Mayhem Destruction might end up being a solid option here as well. As long as you're not CCing the ads, you're killing them all at once. There could be a strategy that involves DKs gripping the ads away or gripping them in, and sometimes CCing them. If that's the case, Mayhem might not be the play, but if you can just play Destro here with Mayhem and just say, hey, I might have some cleave in these ads to help out from time to time, I'm going to do it, that's great, because you're not going to get full havoc value on them. They're going to die quickly, you're going to be CC'd, they're going to be out of range, but if you can say, hey, maybe I proc, maybe I don't, and use some of that damage to funnel into more single target on the boss, it could be a pretty solid alternative. Both Demo and Destro are very close in pure single target damage. This fight's also pretty heavy movement every once in a while. There are times you can plant and cast for 10-15 seconds, and there are times you have to move across the room very quickly. This is likely going to be a pretty tough HPS, DPS / maybe HPS check. I think a lot of the damage here, it's controlled chaos. As long as you don't fall behind on bombs, can control traps, and control ads, this fight realistically might not actually be that bad with the proper strategy. I think this boss was killable in raid testing, but we didn't have enough time to develop a strategy that was good enough to kill it. However, if you have things planned out, if your raid knows what to do in certain situations with nasty overlaps, this boss could surprise people as being one of the bosses you kill quicker in a Race to World first progression setting, but a lot of it depends on tuning. This boss does have a lot of health, and around 40%, we were mostly out of room. Mythic Magmorax is going to be the boss before the second to last boss, so the penultimate boss, if you want to look at it that way. This is also going to be a single target boss, a tight DPS check, likely a tight HPS check as well. It's sort of like Zskarn meets Rashok in the sense. There's mechanics you have to do. You need to control these fire circles that drop along the platform here. The longer you stand in them, the more stacks you accrue, but the more they shrink. I believe they changed this to if you hit 25 stacks of the dot, you die instantly. It used to be 20, but when it was 20, you ran out of room pretty quickly when it came to raid testing. Outside of that, there's a few minor mechanics. Dodge the frontal, make sure you don't get knocked across the room when it does its knockback, but things Warlock can deal with pretty easily. Demonic Circles can deal with that. We were actually gatewaying as a raid out of one of the soaks here as well later on. And for the most part, this is going to be a DPS tank and spank fight. Big damage, big HPS, don't fail mechanics, and hopefully the boss dies. I played a good bit of Demon this fight. I also played Destro. I do think Demonology is the better option here. There is a lot of, at times, unplanned, hectic movement, which I think Demonology is better at. Once again, Madness being 5 seconds is pretty restrictive for Destro. But at the same time, Destro seemed fine here. Demo and Destro are both very, very similar when it comes to raw single target damage. I wouldn't be surprised to see a mix of both Demo and Destro here, but if you're getting power infusion and things, I would certainly give the nod to Demonology, likely playing the Immutable Hatred build. I don't know if you want to go full Pit Lord in here. It would depend a lot on kill times. If the boss dies at 6:30, whatever the enrage is, I don't actually know. If the boss dies at 6:30 or so, 6:45, it very well could be a solid Pit Lord fight. I think chances are high as far as consistent damage is concerned. You just stick with playing Immutable Hatred, Ring of Tyranny, and kill the boss. Echo of Neltharion is the penultimate boss in Aberrus Shadow Crucible, and this fight is actually a lot of fun on Mythic. So these red spoilers on the ground here, they're going to form these walls. Now, Rushing Darkness is a debuff you get that breaks the walls, essentially firing arrows at you, which break the wall. And then a handful of players, like right here, have to LOS a mechanic, which otherwise kills the raid behind the wall. Once you do, you run back through, the wall reforms, and it's rinse and repeat for the most part in Phase 1. Typically, LOS mechanics are sort of gross and not really what people like seeing in raid fights, but I think Phase 1 of Neltharion is pretty well done. I will say off the bat here, Destruction for this week's raid testing was bugged. Immolate and another talent were doing like 100% more damage, so we're not actually this good. But with that being said, I do think this is likely a pretty good Destruction fight, as well as a pretty solid Demonology fight. In Phase 1, it is pure patchwork. The boss runs around the room. You rinse and repeat the wall, breaking LOS mechanic. However, in Phase 2, which we'll see in a moment or so here, they've removed the class calls in this fight. There's no longer hunter mechanics, druid mechanics, mind controls. You know, druids would shapeshift, for example. Warlocks would get a pet you had to banish. Hunters would do something, I don't know. Warriors would blade storm. Those are gone now. You have just basic mind controls, which pull you down to an alternate realm. And once you're down there, you have to break the shields on the 3 adds around the room. Once those shields are broken, the add is visible to the entire raid, and the raid can kill them. There are 3 adds, and having Destro locks in this fight, whether you were mind controlled and went down initially or not, led to an exceptional amount of cleave on both the adds and the boss, and this is what you want if you're a Destro Warlock. This is almost the optimal scenario where you can funnel into an add hardcore, but also have that good funnel in the boss with flashpoint stacks for rolling havoc value, all the above. Now, at the same time, I wouldn't fault somebody for playing Demonology on this fight. It still brings a very strong cleave profile. We weren't stacking the add in the boss here, because if you can indeed cleave mind control players, there's one of the adds there, it'll be broken momentarily. You can indeed cleave your allies and kill them and their pets and everything, and it becomes very annoying. So we were not stacking the adds up here. Demo does lose some value, but at the same time, in phase 3, which we didn't see, there's a lot of heavy, hectic stack cleave with adds spawn from these portals around the room. So I would probably give the nod to Destro here, but at the same time, Demonology also has a pretty strong damage profile. There might be a world where you spec into Rain of Fire and Inferno even for phase 3, but you still want to have that strong controlled cleave with Havoc and all of that in phase 2, while also not losing that single target emphasis that Destro has in phase 1 when you're in a pure patchwork setting. Regardless, Neltharion's going to be a really awesome penultimate boss. I wasn't a huge fan in early testing, but after testing it more, this fight could be one of the best we've seen in a long time. Now, I did want to mention briefly that Scalecommander Sarkaleth has not been tested at all. No normal LFR, Heroic Mythic, and it will not be. PTR testing is now over. However, reading over the Dungeon Journal, it seems like this fight is going to be, honestly, mostly a single target fight, with there being adds present in phase 2 and possibly phase 3. I believe there is a handful of stacked adds, these recollections and things that spawn from the Abyssal Breath boss cast in phase 2. But outside of that, fitting the damage profile of most bosses in this raid, this looks to be predominantly a single target boss with a bit of stack cleave at times. Destro, okay at it. Demonology, Demonic Strength cleave, Implosion cleave, Dog cleave, just Fellstorm cleave, all the above. A very strong damage profile. Also bringing Reign of Tyranny, bringing Hatred, all the above. And like I said, most of the fights this raid tier are predominantly patchwork. We have patchwork. Patchwork-esque on Mythic, there's 2 adds, but patchwork phase 2, patchwork-esque, heavy AoE. This is the meat grinder of the tier. Patchwork, basically patchwork phase 1 with some cleave in phase 2 and heavy AoE in phase 3, and predominantly patchwork. If you're a single target class that has a solid stack cleave profile, or just good at putting out single target damage, this raid is for you. This raid is almost the opposite of what it felt like for Warlock and Vault of the Incarnates. We felt like we were pretty subpar. This raid, it feels like everybody else is pretty subpar. So thanks for watching, guys. That wraps it up. Hopefully it wasn't too long, and hopefully it gave you all a better understanding of how Warlock is currently looking in, I guess, after all the testing is concluded of Aberrus. We still have about a week or so until the raid launches. I am hoping there is no major tuning to Warlock, because, let's be honest, tuning probably doesn't spell good things for Warlock at this point. We are one of, if not the best class in the raid DPS-wise and all that, but the closer we get, I think the chances become less and less likely tuning is going to happen. If there is tuning, hopefully we get it with a week or so's notice and not a day, like 10.1 or 10.0, but, you know, we'll see where it goes. So, like I said before, all the WeakAuras add-ons and profiles you saw in this video, links to Twitch and Discord down below. You can get them all for free. And I also want to give one final shout out again to my patrons. I thank you for all supporting Patreon a million times. I really appreciate it. If you look at supporting on Patreon, it should be a link up here as well as down below. And one more time, the 10.1 Warlock spreadsheet is indeed now live on Patreon. The tier 3 Failguard rank or higher gets early access to that if you're interested in it. And yeah, so even if Destro and Demo do get tuned a bit, which I don't think is incredibly unlikely, we'll have to see where that goes. I do think that Affliction is not as bad as it seems. Affliction was very good at the sort of Heroic Aberrus testing, and it was good for a handful of reasons. Bugs with Demonic Inspiration, Wrath of Minion, Seed being bugged, Dark Lair being unnerfed, and Sack being in its old form as well. The nerfs with the bug fixes did hit AF a good bit, but even with that being the case, I don't think AF is terrible. It's probably still middle of the pack, upper middle of the pack, and yeah. So Fingers crossed it's more of a Destro demo raid, meaning we're good, but hey, if they all get nerfed, AF is still there. All that being said, thanks for watching, guys. If you liked the video, hit the like and sub buttons below, and I'll catch you all again soon on stream. Peace.